Hello, AFI Movie Club. My name is Alfonso Gomez-Rejon. I am an AFI alum and also the director of Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. For those who haven't seen the movie, you may want to watch this little behind the scenes segment after you do. And for those that have seen the movie, might remember this sequence as the moment that we reveal Greg to be an unreliable narrator. Jesse Andrews, who wrote the screenplay based on his book, we talked about that moment of the reveal. And we thought it was important to keep him and set him up as an unreliable narrator, because if you knew that Rachel was dead from the beginning, it would have made the film quite melancholic and maybe hurt some of the comedy along the way. What was important to me too was that I wanted the audience to feel the way, death feels when it's kind of thrust upon you, and change is just thrust upon you. This is actually the very, very last day of shooting. We actually designed the schedule that way for my cast. Obviously had to be after Olivia Cooke shaved her head, but also to allow the actors to bond and work together and then have this be a real goodbye. Every shot had been storyboarded, and it was even up on a board with Velcro. It was really fancy and laminated. It was everything you wanted to be. Chung and I kind of meticulously planned things. Chung, who shot this film, and I wanted everything to be on sticks or dolly, and it didn't work. Nothing was working. We did one rehearsal that was kind of beautiful. The flares were just magical, and the performance was perfect, and we never taped it. So I was chasing what I felt during that take for all the ridiculous reasons. I think I was just avoiding this scene. And as the hours slipped away, I went into the little hospital room where I had all my drawings and realized that I had to just kind of surrender to the moment. And we switched to Steadicam, which is something I was kind of avoiding because of its lack of precision for this sequence. But then I realized that it had a certain dreamlike quality to it, a kind of underwater quality to it that fit Greg's state of mind. Once we decided on that and just kind of gave ourselves over to that, we shot it pretty quickly in order and very simple setups, and just trusted the performances, trusted that you couldn't control the flares. It was just gonna be what it wanted to be. And at that point, it was incredibly emotional for all of us. Greg is such a kind of wordsmith and hides behind his words throughout the entire film. By the time you reach this part of the story, he needs to express himself in a way that is beyond words. It's a kind of a nonverbal way of communication. I think in Jesse's novel and maybe in his script, it was like a compilation of all the films that they made with Earl, played by R.J. Kyler. But I just thought that it might be funny, it might be kind of adorable, but it wouldn't really express who he was and what his state of mind was, and what he has learned about filmmaking along the way. Two wonderful Pittsburgh filmmakers, Nate Marsh and Ed Bursch, we worked together on designing an abstract film based on some, experimental avant-garde filmmakers like Mikas or Brackage. I didn't know how to open that short film, but the weekend before I had gone to the Warhol Museum with Phil Harrison, who was my prop master, and we watched some of the Warhol films and realized that that's the way to start the final film, which was a little bit of a spoof, maybe a little more highbrow of a spoof, based on the Warhol films with Lou Reed and all that, and Edie Sedgwick, and have that be kind of something that they had been exposed to since they're in Pittsburgh and the Warhol Museum is there, and then have that slowly kind of become this experimental film. So it begins as somehow another spoof, yet another spoof that Greg and Earl had made for her, and then it just evolves into something much more personal. Working closely with Jennifer Eve, the costume designer, we had chosen certain color schemes for our cast. Greg was these grays and khakis, so he can kind of hide and blend in everywhere. And Earl was, bright blues and little higher contrast colors. And she was always ultimately going to be yellow, which we just kind of felt was a color of rebirth and a catalyst of sorts. And also all the patterns in her clothes and her turbans and scarves that she would wear throughout the film would make their way into the short film just as texture. So when you see an abstract shape, you might connect it to her. As a temp score for the film, it picked The Big Ship by Brian Eno, thinking it was always going to be temp. And luckily, Brian Eno saw kind of the film and not only let me use that that piece, but about 17, 18 other pieces. Then he ended up writing original music for the film as well, in addition to Nico Muhly's beautiful score. Olivia went all out, 100%. I don't know how she does it. I don't know how any actor does it. You know, to me, they're just magicians. But the fact that she had the courage, and Thomas too, but that she would emotionally go to that same pure place, truthful moment, take after take after take, was just kind of impressive, astounding, magical. They were all such a force.
Should I get a nurse?
A lot of people who had gone through this moment themselves, their emotions were very raw for them. It was a goodbye to a crew and a wonderful experience. It'd been a beautiful production. And it was also me kind of connecting all that had been kind of unspoken of why I wanted to make the movie, and the realization that I was also kind of incorporating loss and feeling again. And after this moment, kind of building myself back up again. You know, I had lost my dad a few years before this, and I had a lot of trouble kind of integrating that loss into my life. And in some subconscious way, I was very much making a film for my dad, the way Greg, played by Thomas Mann, had made a film for Rachel, and it's a real act of love. David Trachtenberg edited the film, and since the very first assembly of this, it just kind of worked. I was almost a little superstitious to mess with it too much, or it would lose a little bit of its magic and that kind of human kind of touch. And other than a little adjustment here or there, it basically is the first assembly of it.
That was the last time I saw Rachel. She went into a coma shortly after that and died about 10 hours later. I know I told you she doesn't die, and I'm sorry. Deep down, somehow, I didn't think she would, but she did.
I always knew that I wanted to end it on 6 or 7 seconds of just yellow, just this kind of color field that kind of was symbolic of her, and just let you kind of rest on that for a while, as she, depending on your faith or where you are personally, spiritually in your life, as she kind of went off into this other dimension. It was incredibly cathartic, and I think a very kind of pure expression of love and loss and confusion. But it was the beginning of a healing process, certainly for me, as it was for Greg.